Hi there, and welcome to this presentation. Believe it or not, despite all the video nonsense I've done in the past, I have never recorded a PowerPoint presentation. So this is take one, and I'm hoping it all goes super smoothly. So here we are talking about the HPO Axis, and I'm probably going to call it Access 18 times because I constantly trip over that word. I'm your host, Ryan Robert Riley, and this is a presentation for school. So we're going to talk about the Hypothalamic-Pituitary-Ovarian axis, or the HPO axis. And we're going to go over structure, menstrual cycle, hormone patterns, exercise, and menopause, starting with structure. So it is made up of the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary gland, and the ovaries. There is your H, P, and O. Hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and ovaries. In the hypothalamus, we start off with the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, GnRH, which is regulated by a number of other substances. Corticotropin-releasing hormone, cortisol, aldosterone, prolactin, leptin, adiponectin, ghrelin, insulin, and IGF-1 are just a few of the things that will turn GnRH on and off. And something might look familiar to you if you have recently looked at the HPA axis, the hypothalamic and let's try that again, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, because that releases corticotropin releasing hormone, cortisol, and aldosterone. So these two axes they have a partnership in the stress response. But anyway, moving on from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary gland, we are talking about gonadotropins, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone. And they are regulated by GnRH pulsatility, which originally here in my notes, I was going to tell you about that. But we bring this up a couple times in these slides, so I'll get into those details as we get closer to that part of the presentation. And then over in the ovaries, the end organ of this axis, we will see androstenedione, testosterone, dehydroepiandrosterone. Oh man, I practiced so many times and I just stumbled over DHEA, but we're going to do it again. Androsterone. Not starting over. We're doing this. Dehydroepiandrosterone and progesterone. And then there are estrogens. There are many estrogens. Primarily, there is estradiol E2, estrone E1, and estriol E3. Estradiol is the primary and most prevalent of the estrogens, and quite often when we discuss the HPO axis, estradiol is what gets most spoken about, but in general, we'll just be speaking about estrogen in most cases. And looking at our gonadotropins, luteinizing hormone is responsible for these guys in the yellow, A4, testosterone, DHEA, and progesterone, whereas follicle stimulating hormone plays a role in triggering the release of estrogens. And oh, look at this. I can see my notes. I've never seen this view before. So a little bit more information for you. Androstenedione, testosterone, and dehydroepiandrosterone come from theca cells. You'll see the corpus luteum in the ovaries release progesterone, and the granulosa cells in the ovaries are responsible for the release of those estrogens. Moving on to the menstrual cycle. So it is made of two phases. They're almost the same in length. They vary, but you have the follicular phase, which is prior to ovulation, and the luteal phase, which happens post-ovulation, with ovulation, of course, being the release of an egg from a ruptured follicle. And estrogen and progesterone regulate the menstrual cycle in response to GnRH pulsatility. There is that term again. We're going to talk about it? Not quite yet. So in the follicular phase, estradiol levels gradually increase over twice their baseline, while progesterone levels remain relatively low. Prior to ovulation, LH, FSH, and estradiol spike, where then in the luteal phase, you'll see estradiol levels decrease, but progesterone levels increase 14-fold over baseline. It looks a little something like this. Yeah, so you'll see that just before, just prior to ovulation, um, estrogen and gonadotropins spike. And then as those levels come down, that is where you'll start to see that gradual increase in progesterone over time. So hormone patterns in the menstrual cycle. Touch on a little bit. There it is. There's the gonadotropin releasing hormone pulsatility that we were discussing before. This is a rough image of the amplitude and frequency over the course of the menstrual cycle. High frequency and low amplitude pulses of GnRH favor luteinizing hormone. This is generally what you see in the follicular phase. And then following that in the luteal phase, as the pulsatility reduces in frequency but increases in amplitude, there is a favored secretion of follicle stimulating hormone. And there's a little divide right there in the middle where ovulation occurs. Here is a lot of words, and you can get more details by digging in. And I'll leave it up for a minute. But the big takeaway here is that luteinizing hormone converts cholesterol to testosterone and induces ovulation. And follicle stimulating hormone aromatizes testosterone to estrogen and drives menstruation. Um, other things are happening there under the hood as LH and FSH levels change, which alter the activity of progesterone and estrogen. Exercise. What does that have to do with the HPO axis? Well, exercise is a stressor, so it increases stress, which increases cortisol, which decreases GnRH, which decreases estrogen and progesterone. So, exercise, it shakes things up. And in response to that stress, the HPO axis essentially shuts down. Um, that is why, um, as good as exercise is, it also can play a role in cessation or at the very least alteration of the menstrual cycle. And because of the things that estrogen and progesterone are related to, which we'll get into in a minute, you can have some severe health effects. Moderate intensity aerobic training, so we're looking about 70% VO2 max, has been seen to increase creatine kinase and interleukin 6 during the luteal phase. So, during that time where you see estrogen reduce but progesterone spike, you will also see an increase in markers of muscle damage. Interestingly enough, women express less creatine kinase than men do. Uh, so it is interesting because some studies show that their levels will spike above that, which will be seen in their male counterparts during moderate intensity aerobic training. Then chronic endurance training, as far as the HPO axis is concerned, we'll see an increase in testosterone, androstenedione, and the luteinizing to follicle stimulating hormone ratio. It can also result in infrequent and irregular menstrual periods, otherwise known as oligomenorrhea. Oligomenorrhea. We're going to go with O, because that's how English works. Oligomenorrhea. And estrogen and progesterone may have protective effects that are menstrual phase dependent. There is evidence, but it's equivocal, that estrogen and progesterone have skeletal-musculo and neuroprotective effects. And some of what we see is promising, but again, it does seem that it is not so much that these hormones alone have this effect, but their levels as they change through menstrual phases. That's where the impact comes from. Speaking of hormones and training, here we go with the big ones, the big two from the HPO axis, the ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Look at all of that. Lots and lots of words. But generally speaking, recovery takes longer in the follicular phase when estrogen is higher, suggesting a relationship between estrogen and recovery. And there's that thing I mentioned earlier that women express less overall CK than men, but when that estrogen spikes, CK also increases. There's also a lot of metabolic effects that come from estrogen, and what I found particularly interesting is lipid preference. When lipids and glucose are in similar supply, estrogen will sort of lean into a lipid preference for aerobic metabolism. Estrogen has demonstrated antioxidative properties, and a big thing is that deficiency in this increases risk for a bunch of diseases and various osteopathic and skeletal muscular conditions. Also, regarding thermoregulation, estrogen promotes vasodilation, heat dissipation, and decreases body temperature, which we'll see in a moment is the opposite of what progesterone does. Progesterone has a lot to do with mechanical stiffness and neuromuscular coordination. Particularly, it can increase mechanical stiffness of tissue, and it can impair coordination. So, where we saw that recovery can be impaired during the follicular phase, performance can be impaired during the luteal phase. So isn't that fun? A little aside, I didn't realize that women who already had things pretty hard to begin with have it even harder through no fault of their own. It's just physiology. Progesterone is a ventilatory agonist, and it is associated with greater minute ventilation. And you'll see that in the luteal phase. So, on one hand, reduced neuromuscular coordination, but on the other hand, basically improved aerobic performance. And as I said, in opposition to what estrogen does, progesterone promotes vasoconstriction, heat retention, and increases body temperature, which, while working on stuff for class, raised some very interesting questions about the impact of birth control. But we are not going to get into that right now because it is not part of this. Let's move on to functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, FHA, a disruption of the HPO axis resulting in stress-induced menstrual cessation. Stress-induced, there are a lot of stressors, which can include weight loss, emotional disruption, and of course exercise. And it all kind of comes down to altered GnRH pulsatility, which triggers a cascade of dysfunctions. Possible things that could happen is an impairment to gonadotropin secretion, reduced estrogen production, increased cortisol production, reduced insulin activity, and a threat of hypothyroidism as T3 is greatly reduced. And as we saw earlier, stress is responded to by both the HPO and HPA axes. And the actions of the HPA axis can essentially kind of just about shut down the HPO axis, which then puts you at risk for all of these harmful dysfunctions and impairments. Menopause, as if things weren't already kind of dire in the way they're being presented here, and I apologize for that. I feel like I am mansplaining something that is totally outside of my purview. Perimenopause and menopause. Perimenopause being the transition to menopause, and menopause being clinically identified by a cessation of a menstrual period for at least a year. Perimenopause is marked by erratic estrogen production that is happening because FSH and cortisol levels are spiking. There's also a shorter follicular phase, greater gonadotropin secretion, and greater estrogen compared to what is experienced in premenopause. And it's really specifically estrone, E1, so not the dominant estradiol, E2, but still that is an estrogen and it is increased. But then we get into menopause, where gonadotropins continue to increase to levels above where they were in perimenopause, but paradoxically, despite this happening, estrogen and progesterone production is reduced. And there's also an increased risk of neurocognitive disorders because, as mentioned earlier, estrogen may very well have neuroprotective effects. And when you take estrogen away, you lose that protection. And of course, after you look at all the various effects that estrogen and progesterone have, when you reduce their levels, you will see impacts on metabolism, energy, recovery, coordination, ventilation, and thermal regulation, as well as a risk of various health conditions, as we mentioned, sarcopenia, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, metabolic syndrome. So age-related health concerns for women are greatly impacted by changes in the HPO axis. So that's a lot of stuff. In summary, and here is more stuff, so many words. I don't think I could have put more words on here if I tried. The HPO axis utilizes GnRH to trigger the release of gonadotropins, that's luteinizing and follicle-stimulating hormone, to stimulate the release of ovarian hormones, including but not limited to estrogen and progesterone, which regulate each other, as well as the menstrual cycle and the HPO axis. Progesterone ignites the luteal phase, whereas estrogen is the primary driver of the follicular phase, which is marked by increasing estradiol levels, as well as just estrogens overall, whereas the luteal phase is marked by increases in progesterone levels. Exercise affects hormones throughout the endocrine system, and some of those hormones, particular to the HPO axis, have a direct impact on the functionality thereof. Estrogen has diurnal and circadian variations, which we didn't really get into in this, but they play a role in muscle damage recovery, tissue repair, and metabolism. Increased estrogen levels, as seen in the follicular phase, are associated with extended recovery times, enhanced lipid utilization, and increased insulin secretion. But wait, there's more. Increased progesterone is associated with impaired neuromuscular coordination, enhanced ventilation, and increased basal exercise-induced core temperature. Considering the dramatic increase in progesterone during the luteal phase, the post-ovulatory half of the menstrual cycle may provide a completely different exercise experience than the pre-ovulatory half. And disruptive states of the HPO axis, such as functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, are multifactorial pathologies that cannot be reduced to a single cause. Exercise can play a role, but contributing factors include external and internal environmental stressors, such as emotional distress and weight loss, as we touched on. And as women transition to perimenopause and then menopause, gonadotropin production increases, but progesterone and estrogen production decreases, which, as already talked about, can impair metabolism, energy availability, recovery, and coordination, ventilation, thermal regulation, and overall health risks. So yeah, the HPO axis, even though its primary thing is the regulation of the menstrual cycle, it has wide-ranging impacts on female physiology. And what is that? Of course, references. Because if we have learned one thing through our graduate studies, it's that it is not good enough to just say, this is what I think, and this is why I think it. We must say, this is what I think, this is why I think it, and here is someone who agrees with me. I will not bore you to tears by reading off every single one of these. Feel free to pause and catch these if you'd like. But there was a number of them. This took quite a bit of time, and it was eye-opening. There was a lot of information to take in during this module, and I am not really sure I'd be able to spit this all back at you without the help of this visual aid. And I gotta tell you, normally in PowerPoint presentations, I use a lot less words and just do a lot more talking, but I figured, you know what, let's put it all out there. Let's have it there for you to see. And that is what it is. If you have any questions, you cannot ask this to me because this is not live. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll do my best to shed some light on something that I am still learning about and really am probably out of my depth on. Have an amazing rest of your life. I will see you sometime.